Hi, and welcome to Treating Trauma Week 5. Um, in this course so far, you have been learning a lot about um, being aware of the impact of trauma from childhood experiences on through adulthood. You've started to understand more about the neurobiology of trauma and how it works with our natural evolutionary responses and the impact on the brain and development. And you have progressed through reading about recent research, studies that are done around trauma, populations, types of traumas, the impact on those populations, and continuing on through the different stages of healing as we look at Judith Herman's stages of healing, thinking of the first two stages, which are really creating safety, a sense of safety and structure, and the second being mourning and remembrance. And this week, we'll start to really look at different modes of therapy, trying to look at the body as a resource, as Rothschild says, and to think about how we can use some somatic approaches and utilize these responses that the body goes through in impact of trauma and use that to help us create greater connection, self-awareness, remembrance for the body of our natural kind of coping mechanisms. You'll see in the van der Kolk reading that there are lots of different types of interventions that are mentioned that range from traditional medication all the way to yoga and more alternative treatments. So this is a week thinking about the healing process. So for this week, as we dive into some of our learning resources, I want you to think about coming away with being able to have an observational sense of some of the somatic responses of traumatized individuals. We want you to be able to describe several treatment approaches that can support these traumatized individuals. And last of all, be able to demonstrate some techniques that we know are geared to increase affect regulation, support emotional regulation, a sense of trust and relaxation and stress reduction. And some of these will come about through the technique demonstrations that we'll have for this week. And you will continue to build upon your toolbox of different strategies that can do this. You will see that there is a PowerPoint below that I'll have you look at, and this is really about using breath as a resource. So for this week, under our readings, we have Chapter 8 in Perry, and this is a fascinating and yet difficult case story called The Raven, and I can predict that your mind will be a little bit boggled by some of the amazing things the brain can do in response to trauma. We also have Rothschild in Chapter 6. And for this, Rothschild is really starting to think about, again, the body as a resource. And, how regardless of the treatment model, there are things that are like non-touch strategies and interventions that can increase those somatic resources. So she really talks about making the body an ally and has some nice concepts about this that we can use in application. And in van der Kolk, he begins to talk about what he sees as the multiple paths to recovery and getting a sense of how emotional regulation is the ultimate goal of all of these different paths, and that these paths can look like traditional medication and medical model to cognitive behavioral interventions to yoga interventions and alternative therapies. And so to that end, there is a PowerPoint I want you to review. And this is another perspective of really using breath as an anchor for some of this trauma treatment. We will continue with looking at trauma from multiple dimensions, and you will go by your letter as we always do, and that will have you switching to looking at trauma for Chapter 8, the Raven story, through a micro dimension, a meso dimension, macro dimension, or the therapeutic approaches. I have increasingly seen people pull in the readings, really do some great in-text citations and connections to the various resources. And I would say the more you can do that and make full use of all of the content, the more articulate and valuable your thought process will be as you're analyzing some of this case story. I would also encourage you to just be mindful of the minimum and maximum guidelines for word count. Our hope with that is to really help you refine your writing style and thinking about how to be really articulate and concise and make each sentence count in your short discussion. You will see next we have our technique demonstrations. So we'll have several technique demonstration by your peers that will occur this week. And just some reminders with these demonstrations. If you are submitting one, you want to make sure that you both submit it and then also respond to your peers who are submitting their technique demonstrations. In this post itself, your initial post, which would be due by Thursday, would include your video and written instructions. And you want to make sure that you also submit these two things for grading under major projects and assignments. There's an actual submission box for your technique demonstration, and this is a step that can often be easy to forget. So you're submitting it in both places. If you are not assigned a technique demonstration this week, your main role is to watch everyone else's technique demonstrations and comment on each one. In your comment, make sure that you talk about some positive things that you like about their technique demonstration, and also attend to how you might use it differently with your clientele, with your population, in your work, your internship, or even in your personal life. And think about, how could this be tweaked for use in real life concrete examples. And last of all, I would consider sort of stretching yourself by adding additional links that back up what you might say, or connect people to resources, whether that's articles or current research about whatever this is. The hope is to really enrich and enhance each other's learning through this type of dialogue. At the end of this week, we have a triad dyad, the group presentation check-in. And in this, your entire focus is really to end up with a group presentation that focuses on different types of therapeutic approaches or interventions that could be used. Now, all of you have the same particular type of trauma focus. And you may have similar populations, or you may have different populations within that trauma focus. So what is really going to result is a presentation that involves 2 or 3 different types of therapies that could be used to treat the particular type of trauma, and also that particular population. And so you want to make sure that the therapy approach you choose connects with your population as well. This way it really leads to sort of a logical progression of your group presentation. And so for this part, what I want your group to do is just have a group member choose who is going to post, and one member of the group would just post a summary of your discussion and decisions, including which therapy each group member has chosen. I think it's also helpful to give a sense of your timeline. As we think about work in groups, we know what's really important is that we're practicing good social work skills involving teamwork, communication, and a sense of how we progress toward our final goal. So I'd love to see a little bit of that in your summary. Again, only one person needs to post, and it automatically gets applied to the other 2 members of the group, or 1 member if that's the case. The next activity, I've posted an extra video. This video is optional and is really in response to some of the feedback that people requested about a little bit more information about the brain. So this is really to enhance your understanding of what we call state-dependent functioning. I think this is just a really well done one, and of course it includes Bruce Perry, who is many of our heroes in the sense of work with children. And in this, it talks about the concept of different brain states that connect with different parts of the brain. So, for example, when we're in a calm brain state, we're really functioning from that neocortex, and we're able to think creatively, abstractly, really at our highest IQ level. However, as we drop down different levels of brain state to one where we're feeling a sense of terror or rage, we're moving more into a primitive brain state where our capacity to think in a creative or abstract way at the top of our thinking, our cognitive thinking, is really compromised. So I think clearly Bruce Perry does a great job of describing this, and it may help clear up some questions people have as we think about the brain. So this wraps up our overview of this upcoming week, week 5. And in closing, I just want to affirm the work that you are doing. Week 5 of our 7-week course. I want to just really congratulate you on all of your efforts. It shows in your discussion forums and your different posts and your technique demonstrations, in your insightful questions, and some of your self-reflection in your journals. This is an incredible amount of personal and professional work that happens as we think about trauma and we try to absorb information about trauma. And so it's processed on both of those realms, and it can take a lot from us. So to that end, I just encourage you to keep practicing your own self-care, refining what that looks like for you, noticing how your own body and your own mind are responding to things. I encourage you to continue to be responsive to feedback. I've seen some great progress in our discussion forums, and as people have been responding to feedback in different forums. Recognize that this is truly a journey as we think about trauma, and one that in many ways transforms how we do our social work practice from here on out.